The morning I found my son-in-law's handwriting on the back of my electric bill, my account number, my signature line, his pen, was the morning everything I had been ignoring for 2 years finally had a name. I didn't say anything. I folded the paper back the way I found it, set it on the kitchen counter, and went to make coffee. My hands were steady. That surprised me. My name is Gloria. I'm 68 years old. I live, or I used to live, in the way you truly live somewhere, in a pale yellow house on the edge of Savannah, Georgia. My husband Theodore built the back porch himself. He died 6 years ago, and I have been in that house alone since, which was fine. Which was more than fine, actually. I had my garden. I had my neighbor Paulette, who brought me tomatoes in the summer and argued with me about everything from politics to pie crust. I had my routines, my quiet mornings, my sense of exactly where I stood in my own life. Then my daughter called and said she and Brendan were having trouble. I want to be honest about something, because I've had enough time now to see it clearly. I said yes too fast. My daughter? I'll call her my daughter because that is what she is. That is all she will ever be to me, whatever happened between us. She was crying on the phone, and I heard the word struggling, and something in me just opened up. The way it always did with her. The way it had since she was 4 years old and scraped her knee on the driveway and looked up at me like I was the only person in the world who could fix it. She and Brendan had been married for 9 years. They had my grandson, Caleb, who was 7 at the time, and had his grandfather's eyes and a habit of leaving his shoes in the exact center of whatever room he'd just walked through. I adored that child. They moved in on a Saturday in late October. I gave them the master bedroom. I told myself it was practical. It had the larger closet, the attached bathroom. It made sense for a family. I moved my things to the guest room at the end of the hall. It was smaller, and the window faced the neighbor's fence instead of the garden. But I thought, it's temporary. A few months. They'll get back on their feet. I want to tell you what getting back on their feet looked like in practice. It looked like Brendan's truck payment coming out of my checking account the second month they were there, because he'd asked to borrow $300 for something else, and I'd handed him my debit card and then never quite tracked what happened after that. It looked like my grocery bill doubling because Brendan liked a specific brand of everything. Specific orange juice, specific coffee, specific cuts of meat, and nobody discussed it. It simply appeared on the receipt. It looked like my daughter telling me gently that Caleb needed new cleats for soccer and his school photos were coming up, and could I help out just this once, and me saying, of course. And then the next month the same conversation about different things. It was never one large thing. That's what I want people to understand. It was 100 small things, each one reasonable on its own, each one something a loving mother would do without question, and I did them all without question, until I didn't. The first time I felt something shift was at Thanksgiving. I had been cooking Thanksgiving in that kitchen for 31 years. Theodore and I had a whole system. He handled the turkey, I handled everything else, and we bickered about the timing of the sides in a way that was really just another form of talking to each other. After he passed, I kept the tradition. I invited people. I set the table the way I always had, with the cream-colored cloth and the candles Theodore's mother had given us. That Thanksgiving, Brendan's family came. His parents, his brother, his brother's girlfriend, 7 people I had met twice before. My daughter had mentioned they might come. She had not mentioned they were bringing dishes I'd never agreed to, that Brendan's mother would walk into my kitchen and begin rearranging my counter space to fit her things. Or that by the time we sat down, the table looked like someone else's holiday entirely. I sat at my own table, and felt like a guest who had not been told the dress code. I didn't say anything that day either. I smiled. I passed things. I refilled glasses. My daughter caught my eye once across the table and gave me a look that said thank you, which I understood to mean I know this is a lot, and also please don't make it harder. So I didn't. But something had been noted. Inside me, something had been noted. Inside me, something had opened a drawer and placed that evening inside it. January was when Brendan lost his job. He'd been working in logistics, managing a warehouse about 20 minutes from the house. He came home on a Tuesday afternoon, and I heard them talking behind their closed door for a long time. My daughter came out and told me that evening over dinner, while Caleb was watching television in the other room. She said it matter-of-factly, the way you report weather. Brendan lost his job. He's already applying. It'll be fine. I said I was sorry to hear it. I meant that. What I did not anticipate was that it'll be fine would mean that everything continued exactly as it had, except now, with one income removed. My daughter worked as a dental office coordinator. She made decent money, not enough for the 3 of them on their own, but enough combined with unemployment benefits and some adjustment to manage. The adjustment, as far as I could tell, never came. By March, my electric bill had gone up $40 a month. The thermostat was set to a temperature I would not have chosen. There was a second streaming service I hadn't signed up for appearing on my bank statement. When I mentioned it to my daughter, she said Caleb liked a show on there and she'd pay me back. She never did. It wasn't the money, not at the dollar amount of it. It was the way she said it, already walking out of the kitchen before the sentence was finished, as though I had simply needed to be informed, and the matter was now closed. I am 68 years old. I spent 32 years working as an office manager for a cardiology practice. I balanced budgets. I supervised staff. I handled insurance disputes that would make a grown man weep. I am not a woman who does not notice things. I noticed everything. I just didn't say anything because every time I thought about saying something, I thought about my daughter's face. And I let that stop me. The electric bill with Brendan's handwriting was in April. I stood at that counter with my coffee, and I read it again. He had written down my account number, my provider's phone number, and a note to himself that said auto pay setup, confirm with G. I had not confirmed anything. I had not been asked to confirm anything. I put the bill back where I found it. I drank my coffee. I went to my garden and I pulled weeds for an hour without really seeing what I was doing. That evening I called my friend Nadine. Nadine and I have known each other for 40 years. We met when our children were in the same kindergarten class and we were both wearing the same shade of terrible coral lipstick that was fashionable that year, and we laughed about it in the pickup line and never really stopped talking after that. She is the kind of woman who listens all the way to the end before she speaks, which is rarer than people think. I told her everything. The truck payment, the grocery bills, the Thanksgiving, the streaming service, the bill with the handwriting. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. Gloria, she said, do you understand what's happening in your own house? I said I thought I did. She said, I don't think you do, or you wouldn't still be sleeping in the guest room. I didn't answer that. Call your bank tomorrow morning, she said. First thing, find out what accounts they have access to, what's been set up, what can be changed. And Gloria, don't tell them you're doing it. I slept badly that night. Not from anger, as too clean an emotion for what I was feeling. It was more like grief, the specific kind that comes from realizing something has been happening to you for a long time, and you were the last to see it. I lay in that small room with the window facing the neighbor's fence, and I thought about Theodore, about the way he used to say that the hardest thing in the world is to love someone and still have a spine. I thought about my daughter at 4 years old, looking up at me from the driveway. I thought about the bill on the counter. At 5:40 in the morning, I got up, got dressed, and made a list. The bank opened at 9. I was in the parking lot at 8:50, which is not something I would normally do. But I had learned something about myself that night. Once I make a decision, I need to move on it before I can talk myself out of it. I had spent 2 years talking myself out of things. I was done with that. The branch manager's name was Patricia, and she had the efficient kindness of someone who had sat across from a lot of people in difficult situations and knew how to be useful without being sentimental. I told her I was concerned about unauthorized access to my accounts. She asked me a few questions. She pulled up my records. What she showed me took my breath away for a moment. Brendan had not only set up autopay for the electric bill, he had linked my checking account to a joint profile he'd created using my debit card information, probably from the time I'd handed it to him back in November. It was not exactly fraud in a criminal sense, Patricia explained carefully, because the account was still mine and the access had been set up using real credentials. But it was not authorized. And it could be changed. We changed it. All of it. New account number, new card, new PIN, two-factor authentication on everything. Patricia also suggested I contact my credit card company and add a note to my account. I did that too, from the parking lot, before I drove home. I sat in my car for a while after. I wasn't crying. I want to be clear about that, because I think people expect tears in a moment like that, and I understand why. But I wasn't sad. I was something more complicated than sad. I was tired, in the way that comes after a long effort has finally ended. I was also, underneath everything else, quietly furious. The cold, clear kind of fury that doesn't raise its voice. I thought about what I was going to say when I walked back in that door. Then I thought, not yet. There was something else I needed to do first. I drove to the office of a family attorney Paulette had recommended 2 years ago when Paulette's sister was going through her own difficult situation. The attorney's name was James Whitfield, and he had an office on Bull Street with a waiting room that smelled like old wood and leather, and a secretary who handed me a clipboard without making me feel like a problem. I told Mr. Whitfield what I needed. I wanted to review my will, which I had not updated since Theodore died. I wanted to understand what my options were regarding the house. Specifically, what it would take to formally establish that the house was mine alone, that no one living in it had any claim to it, and that if something happened to me, the disposition of my assets would be exactly what I decided it would be, with no ambiguity and no room for argument. He listened. He took notes. He asked careful questions. By noon, I had a follow-up appointment for the following week, and a much clearer picture of where I stood legally. The house was mine, free and clear, paid off 6 years ago. My will, as written, left everything to my daughter with no conditions. That, Mr. Whitfield said, was something I might want to revisit. I told him I would think about it. I drove home. They were all there when I got back. Brendan in the living room watching something on television, my daughter in the kitchen, Caleb at the table doing homework, with his shoes on the floor in the exact center of the doorway. I stepped around them, kissed the top of Caleb's head, and said hello to my daughter. She asked where I'd been. I said I'd had some errands. She looked at me for a moment with something in her expression that I couldn't quite read. Not suspicion, exactly, but awareness. The awareness that something was different. I had not changed my tone or my face. But my daughter has known me for 40 years, and there are things that pass between a mother and daughter that don't need words. I made tea and went to sit in the garden. The next 3 days were ordinary on the surface. I made meals. I watched Caleb's soccer practice on Thursday afternoon. I had coffee with Paulette on Friday morning. On the inside, I was composing, working through what I needed to say and how to say it, not in anger, not as an attack, but as a statement of fact. I have found over the years that the most powerful things can be said in the quietest voice. Saturday morning, Brendan left early to meet a friend. My daughter and Caleb were in the living room. I waited until Caleb wandered off to his room, and then I sat down across from my daughter, and I put 3 pieces of paper on the coffee table between us. The first was a printout of my updated account information, not the details, just the confirmation that changes had been made. The second was the bank statement showing the charges I'd identified. The third was a single sheet I had written by hand the night before, a simple list, every financial contribution I had made since they moved in. Not as an invoice, as a record. My daughter looked at the papers. She looked at me. I said, I need us to talk about what's been happening. What followed was not a screaming match. I had not wanted that, and I didn't get it. My daughter went through several things in quick succession. Surprise, then defensiveness, then something that looked very much like shame. She said Brendan hadn't told her about the account setup. She said she'd assumed I knew. She said things had just gotten away from them, that it was never the intention. I let her talk. I had promised myself I would let her talk. When she was finished, I said, I know you didn't intend to hurt me. I also know that intent doesn't change what happened, and I need you to understand that this is my house. Not in an angry way. Just, it is. And I need to start being treated like the person who lives here, not like a resource. The word resource stopped her. I saw it land. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Mom, I'm sorry. I believed her. That's the complicated truth of it. I believed her, and it didn't fix anything immediately, and we both knew it. The weeks after were difficult in a different way. Brendan and I had a separate conversation that was shorter and harder. He was defensive in a way that my daughter was not, and there was a moment where I thought it might turn into something I didn't want it to become. But I had the clarity on my side, and clarity is a remarkable thing when you've spent 2 years without it. I simply kept returning to facts, not feelings, not accusations. Facts. He had no response to facts. They began looking for an apartment in May. I won't pretend it was a seamless transition. There were awkward weeks, a few dinners where the silence had texture. My daughter and I moved around each other with the particular care of 2 people who had said real things and weren't quite sure yet how to be easy with each other again. But we kept trying. That mattered. Caleb made me a card before they left. He'd drawn a picture of the house, yellow, which he'd gotten right, and written inside, in the determined handwriting of an 8-year-old, I love Grandma's house. I love Grandma. He'd spelled Grandma without the D, which I thought was perfect. I put it on the refrigerator. The morning they moved out, I stood on the back porch Theodore built, and I drank my coffee, and I listened to the birds and the sound of Brendan's truck backing out of the driveway for the last time, and I did not feel triumphant. That's not the word. I felt something closer to restored, like a room that has been cleared of furniture, and you can finally see the floor again. The proportions of the space, the light coming through the window at its actual angle. I called Nadine that afternoon. She said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it. Like myself, I said. I feel like myself. She laughed. She said that was the whole thing, wasn't it? That's the whole story right there. I've had some time now to look back at those 2 years and understand what I would tell someone else in that situation. Not as judgment. I made every choice I made out of love, and I don't regret the love. But I would tell them, there's a difference between giving freely and being slowly relieved of what's yours. The first is a gift. The second happens so gradually that by the time you notice, you're sleeping in the small room with the window facing the wrong direction and someone else's handwriting is on your bills. I would tell them, the moment you see it, name it. Not to punish anyone, just to see it clearly, in the light. I sleep in the master bedroom now. The window faces the garden. In the mornings, when the light comes through at that angle I'd forgotten, I think about Theodore, and about Caleb's card on the refrigerator, and about the particular courage it takes. Not dramatic courage, not the movie kind, but the quiet, everyday kind, to say, this is my life, and I am still the one living it. That's enough. That has always been enough. I've thought a lot about what I would say if someone asked me how it all happened, how a woman who spent 32 years managing a cardiology practice, balancing budgets, handling disputes, supervising staff, ended up sleeping in the small room of her own house while someone else's handwriting appeared on her bills. The honest answer is that it didn't happen all at once. It happened the way most things happen, one small yes at a time, each one reasonable, each one made out of love, until the yeses had stacked up so high I couldn't see over them anymore. That's the part I needed to sit with, not what Brendan did, not even what my daughter allowed to happen, but what I allowed. Because the truth is, every time I handed over a card without asking questions, every time I smiled through a Thanksgiving that didn't feel like mine, every time I told myself it was temporary and walked back to the small room, I was teaching people how to treat me, not intentionally, not without love, but the lesson landed all the same. There's something I'd come to understand about the way we treat people who never push back. We stop thinking about whether we're asking too much. It's not always cruelty. Sometimes it's just comfort. When someone always says yes, you stop wondering whether the answer might be no. And when that person is your mother, the one who fixed every scraped knee, the one who always had room and warmth and an open door, it becomes very easy to forget that she's also a person with limits, with needs, with a room she deserves to sleep in. What changed things for me wasn't rage. I want to be clear about that. It was clarity. The moment I saw Brendan's handwriting on my bill, something in me stopped negotiating with itself. All the reasons I'd been holding back. I don't want conflict. I don't want to damage the relationship. I don't want to be the kind of mother who keeps score. They went quiet. And what was left was just the truth, plain and simple. This is my house. I worked for it. Theodore and I built our life in it. And I had been slowly talked out of it, inch by inch, without anyone ever sitting me down and asking permission. The morning I drove to the bank before they woke up was the morning I stopped waiting for someone else to notice the problem. That's the thing about self-respect. Nobody else can restore it for you. Nadine could tell me to call the bank. Mr. Whitfield could help me understand my options. But I had to be the one to get up at 5:40 in the morning and decide that what was mine was still mine. That decision cost me something. The weeks after were hard. My daughter and I had to learn how to talk to each other again, without the old pattern of her asking and me giving. Brendan and I had a conversation I wouldn't describe as easy, but on the other side of that difficulty was something I hadn't felt in 2 years. I felt like myself. Not someone's resource. Not a soft place for other people's problems to land. Myself, a woman with a house and the garden and a card on the refrigerator from her grandson who spelled grandma without the D. What I'd do differently, if I could go back, is this: I'd say the quiet part out loud much earlier. Not in anger, just clearly. This is what I can give. This is where I stop. Kindness without limit isn't kindness. It's an invitation to keep going. And the people who love us, when they're honest with themselves, don't actually want to take more than we can give. They just need us to tell them where the line is. Caleb will be older one day, and I genuinely hope, that what he takes from all of this, growing up around a grandmother who eventually stood in her own kitchen and said enough, is that love and limit can live in the same house. That you can hold someone's hand and still hold your ground. That's not coldness. That's integrity. And integrity, I've found, is the only thing that holds up over time.